G'day friends and fans. Welcome to Dave Talk Stuff. You heard me right. The title is correct. Protecting the divorce economy. Yes, the government is now trying to protect the divorce economy. Polis, a major social economic think tank tied to it's based in Australia, but it is tied to the London School of Economics and thus the World Economic Forum, wants to protect the divorce economy. Because divorce has a negative social economic impact of women, in a policy abstract paper, they argue the negative impact on household income for women in the short term lasts for up to 6 years after divorce, by which income is largely recovered to where they were if they had remained married. In contrast, men recover much quicker. They claim men actually recover lost assets, and that the negative impact that it has on women needs to be offset with further government protections, particularly in protecting women post-divorce, especially those with children. Because it appears women on average, relatively short term, however, still requires protective measures for, you guessed it, equity of income and addressing the gender pay gap. So basically, they're arguing for a global man tax to address inequalities. So they're going to tax you for just being a man. And they're arguing so you get divorced, you recover, and they want to have you bring up your spouse. Despite all the negative impacts. Now, most people would call, once upon a time, women who demanded divorce, right? Demanded assets and income post-divorce used to be called derogatory terms. Now, they're an economic driver. Lawyers, judges, the entire legal system. I can't emphasize enough. You can't get enough statistics, really. There are over 1,300 law firms, which represent around 13,000 legal professionals just in my state. Around 3% of the world's lawyers have a job because they profit off divorce. That's a lot of lawyers. Who are politicians? Lawyers. Who do politicians primarily listen to? Lawyers. Who are the biggest donors, of course, after bankers? Yeah, lawyers and academia, right? The legal system are one of the biggest donors, right? You'd think it's industry. Industry's average. A few billionaires give big, but on a whole, it's institutions, and institutions spread out, right? If an institution has 1,300 employees, that enables them to make 1,300 donations. You do realise these are big business. 3% of something that's 20% of your economy. It's a huge chunk. This is how government looks at everything. It's just pure maths. It's nothing personal, they would claim. But really, lawyers, that is, people who financially take advantage of others for their own gain, have a big impact on the economy. It is a huge driver of high-end employees. Lawyers are not cheap. And they are often called derogatory terms, even by each other. Lawyers used to once upon a time only work. Lawyers were not that well paid once over 100 years ago. It's the perceived value given to lawyers, academics, and actors and musicians through propaganda, through the mainstream media, through women enamored by how easy they make money. They do have traditionally earned a little bit more than others. Accountants sort of do fall under that just a little bit more, but not that much more. I've worked in finance, predominantly as an accountant, but not a accredited accountant, which means a huge gap in pay. But to get accreditation isn't cheap or easy, and it's hard when you don't have secure employment. But to obtain money or possessions using deception or emotional manipulation, it's not a crime when it's divorce. It is the biggest fraud protection racket. It is racketeering. And the victims often are worse off. They have a negative impact. Divorce has had a negative impact on the whole economy. But it benefits a narrow slither of the economy, which gets extremely wealthy. Lawyers get extremely wealthy compared to other mundane jobs. They're not. Same with journalists. There's few lawyers, few journalists, few of lawyers that get extremely wealthy. But don't forget, there's a secondary industry. High-end fashion, high-end accessories, such as handbags and briefcases. There's an entire industry downstream from lawyers that get rich, that benefit as well. But overall, yes, the negative they're only measured in some countries. China is trying to outlaw divorce. As we speak, they are the negative impact because men won't remarry. But the problem is the severe emotional, financial stress. Now, yes, men usually recover, but it's 6 years, 3 to 6 years average, right? But it's only to where you were. You'd never catch up. That's the thing that right? So they want women to catch up to the man post-divorce, but the man has not caught up. Not only, he's fallen behind his peers. It takes him years to get ahead, and he ends up 31% ahead of her, right? Her income's gone down. His spending goes down. So the amount of money he has retained after, right? Because his lifestyle is now minimal, his residual, discretionary funds, that is the amount of money is left after mandatory spending such as food, rent and utilities, has gone up. So they argue they've got to take money off him because he's now has to make sure that she doesn't suffer. So they're adding to the psychological damage and the constant economic disruption of divorce. But the divorce rate has seen an increase in many social disorders, particularly amongst children. Depression, anxiety, and of course, 70% of people in jail are the product of divorce, single mothers. Long-term health, divorced people die earlier, particularly amongst women. Women are dying earlier from getting divorced. Funny. So marriage may have shortened man's life by 3 years, but getting divorced shortens women's life by over 6 years. So women are dying earlier. But overall, economic impact of divorce overall is higher, right, than any net return of having 3% more lawyers. The actual negative effect on the economy, though not, is only estimated because the long-term psychological, physical and mental health and the decline in productivity often happens when you're in your 40s and 50s. So, and the government don't measure those. They only measure from 18 to 35. Some countries 25. Yeah, they don't measure all economic data. They only estimate GDP based on government taxation and reporting. So what we have is global approved economic exploitation that leads to a catastrophic strain on society. And the government's answer to this catastrophic strain is to increase it with more taxes. Yet, divorce has led to reduced consumer spending, higher debt. Men have spent more and gone into more debt than women have getting into marriage. Yet, that's never taken into account in the divorce. Wealth distribution. The governments are obsessed now with wealth distribution. It's a political hot potato. Every political party, bar few, promise some form of wealth redistribution, addressing income inequality. Yet they never address the fact that women do end up, short-term at least, and it is only a handful who end up ahead, but economically, right, opportunistic people are preying on wealthy people, taking their assets, taking their money, disrupting families, which is why fewer get married, or if they do, they only marry for contract. So what we have is an inefficient economy where money is taken off the productive and increased to the unproductive, because the unproductive may boost short-term spending, but in long-term, like, it's overall negative. You get spikes in spending. Women go on spending sprees after their divorce, but at the end of the day, they are non-contributors to the economy now. You know how so many people lose their jobs over divorce? They scale back their life after divorce. Men reduce their spending. The government, however, disincentivizes saving, low interest, low returns, low economic opportunity. Investments, you have to invest and risk losing your pensions. Right? Pensioners lose money. This is a huge problem now, where couples, when they retire, get divorced. And all of a sudden, uh, it's often driven by a perception that you're going to be better off. But the reason why so many people are getting divorced is because there's a rise in toxic behavior. See, in order to get divorced, you can't like the person. So they build up toxicity, hatred, and anonymity. They treat you like a stranger. They detach. It's the same with cheating. When they want to cheat, they detach. There is no incentive to get married. Now, before I continue, Empire Valves. That's empirevalves.myshopify.com. You'd like to support the channel? Get a coffee mug today. Empire Valves is a world of magic and wonder created by me. That's Empire Valves, one word, myshopify.com. Links in the description below. Now, a lot of people may not care about economic efficiency, but governments do, and that's why they're panicking. And their stupid solution is to tax men to subsidize divorced women. Yeah, because they think it hurts the kid. Because they'll think we just throw money at the problems and the kids will stop hurting. No, you took daddy away. You gave them a stepfather. You damaged them. You damaged them. Their psyche, their psychology, their psychological development. And so what you have is divorced women who give rise to daughters who go get divorced, who give rise to daughters who turn into streetwalkers. But the government don't care because their overall economic value is their overall world outlook is to only look at people as economic value. But the legal system creates additional financial costs, additional financial burden on society, but can't sustain divorce merely on fleecing the divorced. So many of them, so forget, the majority of men going to divorce court, over 70%, have nothing. That's why it's a churn. And it's getting a bigger and bigger churn. You know, divorce courts are still clogged. Marriage rates are down, divorce rates are down, but still, divorce courts are clogged. Because now, instead of waiting days or it's now or weeks, they drag out the process. They drag you in over and over again. They drag out the process, thus increasing the cost of divorce. Even if you do take legal action against someone who married you only for money or a visa or spur of the moment action and you want a divorce, it costs. There's no recovery of cost. There's no recovery for the economy. But it's the erosion of rights which is the biggest damage. Property rights. You have no property rights. You are not king of the castle. They're eroding. They're eroding domain. They want you to own nothing because the rich, they want to own. The rich, they just want bigger. They just want bigger portfolios. They're running out of companies to buy, as you've seen lately. You know. Well, growing up, remember, you used to hear about big mergers all the time. The companies are running out of mergers. Governments are trying to block monopolies, but these huge asset management companies, they're running out of assets to invest in. And they're getting billions poured into them every day by oil companies, because entire countries are robbing their economies and pouring them in asset managers. And it's not just Arab, it's Norway, Sweden, 12. That's why they want a war against Russia, to take over 150 billion in assets from Russia to give to Ukraine to prop up the Ukrainian economy so they can afford to join Europe. Because the Europeans want the tax the tax revenue. Now the Japanese the Japanese economist recently came out and said, stop migrants, invest in children. Invest in Japanese children. Some prefectures are looking at that seriously. That actually migrants cost more money than children. They always believed, or led to believe, it was always the other way around. Until they found out it was all being subsidised by the UN, all this mass migration subsidised by the UN with US aid. So, worst is when you're in a commercial partnership. Most commercial partnerships or any business forced into sale to pay out these divorcees. Now this creates permanent commercial distrust. A lot of companies won't invest in divorced people. You're seen as an economic liability. So divorce has impacted commercial operations, it stifled innovation in many cases, because you look at big IPOs, right? In the last 20 years, most of them have failed. Would you be surprised if it was because most of the people, as the money was rolling in, she divorced him, disrupting the economy, destabilizing the companies? Women forcing their way into companies, academics turned entrepreneurs, expecting big money, big paychecks. It's not just AAA gaming. All tech industries, overpaid workers, draining the IPO before they can become profitable. So they never get past the threshold. Most tech, right? You think about it, right? With millions of inventions, most tech is very narrow, very restricted, very narrow, very small markets in some cases. You think once upon a time, pocket calculators everywhere. Now, no one sells pocket calculators. They're just a stationary item now, in the back corner, rarely used. Don't have a big call for pocket calculators like we used to. Heck, some schools are getting rid of them because they make students lazy. But yeah, no one wants to work with divorced women, by the way. You know that, right? So isolation, social isolation, divorced women congregate and they turn on each other. But divorced people change their financial behaviour. Now, just because some government think tank says, 6%, the majority recover their wealth, no, they misrepresent. The truth, honestly, globally, people are worse off than they used to be. For the first time in history, we have seen negative consequential growth. Look around many. Now, divorce isn't the only thing, but from divorce, you have increased drug use, increased crime, reduced productivity, reduced. Still, the West has a higher GDP to income ratio than, say, China has the worst in the world, but most middle, or what they call the economic south, they have India's realised that it has to pay its workers more, and yeah. But so we have a change in economic behaviour because of high divorce rates, which is leading to low marriage rates, or what they call now weekend marriages, right? Couples who live together predominantly on the weekend, and during the week they maintain their separate lives, and they go their separate ways when the relationship ends. Now, yes, they actually are usually what you would call a contract marriage. They have a contract, they part ways, and that's it. There's still usually a payout involved to her. Most women don't, and this is the fact. Okay, a fact of life. Most women today do not get married for affection and or family. They get married for economic benefit. And this is causing a change in financial behavior of married people. Okay? Splitting the bills. Men are taking less care of their wives, spending less on their wives, and wives, there's less investment because in the last 30 years, what has been driving women's investment is women who listen to all these feminists and take money off their husbands and invest it for themselves in secret. This is racketeering. You are money laundering. You have entire industries of lawyers and financial institutions that are now dying because they were involved in money laundering. Asset managers. The low-end asset managers are closing. Don't forget, when they talk about statistics, you may hear bigger numbers than 20 years ago, but trust me, it's all inflationary. It's all funny money. And a lot of investment houses, their money's not coming from individuals. They're coming from unions, mutual funds, community banking. There's a whole range, and government institutions that invest. China being one of the biggest investors in the world right now. Now, fear of exploitation has led to many people, like I said, in choosing short-term, cheaper relationships, lowering the amount of money available for investment. They're not making as much investments. They're not making as much investment in other people. They are spending more time away from companies and the toxic environments that they have become, because feminism, when they don't succeed in the home, they attack you in the workplace. Fear of exploitation has caused men to withdraw, to become more conservative, to work less, thus lowering the amount of money in the society, because men are the hyperproductive, women are the underproductive. Women are using their numbers and their anger and their voting blocks. Now, if men were able to form an economic voting bloc, you watch. Most women are not economically viable. You give 1,000 people $1,000, 80% of those will be broke within a year. The majority of women today would not exist in the lifestyle they have, not for welfare. And welfare should not be a career. But this idea has spread that people should be independent, which is great until you're an independent man. You have still today, there is a social stigma, except amongst MGTOW, for single men. There are a lot of companies in high-end jobs that you can't get as a single man. Heck, they'll hire a gay man over a straight man, simply because of the perception of productivity. And the only reason why divorced men are less productive is the social and economic damage done to men by women. If divorces were cleaner, men's rights were respected and protected. The whole problem is men are unable to organise against the matriarchy. We live in a matriarchy and have for the last 300 years. Wealth preservation used to be the goal, right? Stop the break, because company breakups lead to people unemployed. Housing sales leads to increased debt in society. More and more people can't meet their debts. More and more banks and other institutions to recover lost profits had to increase interest rates, decrease returns of investments. The point, it's not worth saving. Savings account are less than inflation. Everything's less than inflation, except for the lucky few who make good investments and succeed. Now, the economy is suffering, and you might not care about the economy, but people are suffering. But most people don't care when men suffer. But I think the biggest problem is going to be the long-term negative effects, because society is never going to be the same. Children are going to be a commodity, owned and controlled by the government. That's not a good outcome, folks. Freedom is dying because of women and divorce. The negative impact on society of the concept of wealth redistribution, particularly the eat the rich mentality, the you can suffer because you're an oppressor mentality, that's what's really driving divorce. And ultimately, that, the life you grew up with, and the lifestyle, the country. That's why they want demographic change. They want to turn society into a great mush of one world, one language, one religion, one race. That's not diversity. That's the end of it. Women only having girls, that's not diversity. That's a monoculture. When there's no more marriage, you don't have freedom. You're not free from hunger. You still have to you have to produce food. Too many people have convinced themselves, this is why idiots should never be allowed to vote, because they convince themselves that they are entitled to a life of luxury and ease and all these other things, to lie on someone's couch, eat bonbons, watch television, and breathing is the reason why they get paid. And they think the productive will just go quietly into the night. But civilization collapses. Civilization is plumbers, electricians. It's not doctors and lawyers. But doctors and lawyers have the media, academia as a whole, have us all convinced that they're the important ones. They don't drive innovation. Individual hyper-productive people drove innovation, then passed that knowledge on through academia. But increasingly, it's all about economic efficiency, but the government has it all backwards, because when the government talks about economic efficiency, the only economy they're caring about is political donations. So until we retake our sovereignty, we are not free. We are not sovereign citizens. MGTOW is a threat to government autocracy. The government should only be short-term management of crises, providers of mass services, and protectors of its citizens, not driven by outside influences like, ooh, we're the richest country in the world, we have to have the biggest population in the world, or anything like that. No. But unfortunately, teaching good for the last 2,000 years, no matter what religion it is, by the way, I'm not pointing at Christianity here. When we were a majority Christian country, we were prosperous. That prosperity went as Christianity went. There's something inherent in Christian values that bring out the best in humanity, and productivity follows. But the handful of people who have power, wealth, and influence just can't stand that someone has $1, and they just sit there trying to think how to get it off you each and every time. So the entrepreneur like myself who's just trying to make a living suffers, while the manipulative can get you to buy a $1,000 concert ticket. You'll pay $50 a month for OnlyFans, but won't buy a $3 book because it's too expensive. They have you so imprisoned in ideas that you have still yet to shed. It's a story for another day, but until you are no longer controlled by algorithms and perceived values, you're not free. Our society has been hijacked for the last 300 years by sweet talk. Men used to be very resilient. Men were engaged in learning and philosophy and self-improvement. MGTOW threatens to return us to that world. So I'm not decrying or trying to preserve or conserve a corrupt system. I think MGTOW will steer us back to prosperity, because every other system is headed to autocracy. So thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Please support the channel. You support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.